The following program is suitable for general audience of any age.
Tonight, we discuss the legal fundamentals of disaster management in the Sri Lankan context, what legislature governs this area and what legal responsibilities lie with the relevant authorities. A very good evening and thank you for joining us on yet another episode of Law, Land and Liberty here on Other Than the News channel, where we bring to you key legal concepts and break it down for the layman. Today's topic is quite relevant considering the current climate context that we're in and also for the general public and our viewers at home to understand exactly where the law lies when it comes to disaster management and disaster relief efforts. Specifically, we are going to be going on a fully legal scope on this very educational outlook on exactly where the laws lie and what kind of responsibilities the government and other authorities that have been legislated have when it comes to disaster management and disaster relief. And to speak about this, we have someone that is not a new face on the show, but it's been quite some time since we've been able to welcome her back onto the program. I'm very pleased to welcome back Professor Kokila Lankathilake Konasinghe. Thank you so much, Professor, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and help our audience actually understand the basics and fundamentals of where disaster management laws lie in Sri Lanka. A bit of an introduction. Professor Kokila Lankathilake Konasinghe is not a new face on the program. She is also the head of the Department of Public and International Law at the Faculty of Law at University of Colombo here in Sri Lanka. And she's also the founding director of the Centre for Environmental Law and Policy. She's also a senior lecturer at the faculty as well. Safe to say we're in very good hands when it comes to understanding the depth of disaster management laws in Sri Lanka. Here's how we're going to be approaching this topic. First and foremost, we'll be getting into the basics and understanding the absolute concepts of the laws that have been present in Sri Lanka as of current times. Next, we'll be going into the responsibilities and also the institutions that have been legislated under these acts and laws. And finally, we'll be talking about state duties, citizens' rights, and also what we can expect to see when it comes to emergency powers as well as safeguards.
Hi, my name is Oshini Pilapitia, a third-year law student from the Faculty of Law, University of Colombo. My question is on the fundamentals. What are the laws that govern disaster responses in Sri Lanka?
All right, well, without any further ado, let's get right into this discussion. Professor, thank you so much for taking the time once again. I think we should get right into the discussion. First and foremost, can you help us understand exactly what the legal concept is behind the term disaster management? Now, we've had this term thrown around a lot in recent times, but if you could help us understand the legal scope of this word.
Yes. Now, law is there to direct the society, a particular community and a state. So, in disaster management related legal framework is basically directing the state and also other parties to regulate and to prepare for preparedness and also disaster response. So all these areas are covered in terms of this when we talk about the disaster management laws. Now it includes laws, mainly a statute, and also policies and also regulations and various directions from time to time, depending on the disaster situation. So if we think about the broader overview of disaster laws, it is disaster laws is a body of laws, policies, regulations for the state to govern how state will government and state will manage the disaster situations and also preventing and minimizing the risk as well as the life and property and economy. So
yes.
This is a very overarching understanding of disaster laws.
Yes, and Professor, very rightly you mentioned as well that we have certain pieces of legislation that have been mentioned when it comes to disaster management. I think it would be beneficial for us to understand exactly what these pieces of legislation are and where the laws and policies lie. Can you please help us walk through where exactly the law lies?
Yes. Now, until 2004, we did not have any kind of legal framework to manage laws when it comes to disaster. Disasters were considered as a very natural phenomenon, and then from time to time floods come, droughts come, it's acts of God. So that's the kind of understanding it was until 2004 in Sri Lanka. And also disasters and the disaster relief was considered as some sort of a charity that government and private parties get together and provide during a disaster. But this entire understanding of disaster was shifted to more broader as well as more policy oriented initiatives with the tsunami in 2004 December. Now soon after that, Sri Lanka is in the forefront within South Asia when it comes to preparing these laws, because Sri Lanka has Disaster Management Act. So we are one of the nations in the South Asia who had this first Disaster Management Act, number 13 of 2005. Under which we have recognized different type of laws in preparedness, response, recovery, reconstruction. So the entire scope of disasters and its management is coming under this particular act. Under this act, two main institutions are there. One is the Disaster Management Council, National Disaster Management Council, which is the main authority, and also it has government and opposition and also other institutions, government institutions related to and also line ministries related to a disaster. So this is a very comprehensive framework under this council arrangements are there. And also Disaster Management Center for preparedness and then planning for disaster is with the Disaster Management Center. So these are the two main kind of institutional arrangement under the main law, Disaster Management Act. Other than that, we have Constitution, and under which we have several provisions that might relate into a disaster situations, and also the President can declare a state of emergency under the Public Security Act, and likewise we have several other related laws also for disaster. So in brief, it's a very comprehensive legal framework that is there for disaster management in Sri Lanka.
So, Professor, that's very somewhat reassuring to hear, as well as you mentioned, we are one of the first in the region to help enshrine and ratify when it comes to the legal process what we can do during disaster situations rather than leaving it up for uncoordinated charity efforts. I want to ask you, Professor, related to now, this is of course disaster management as a whole has been enshrined as an act and there are multiple laws, but what exactly specifies as a disaster when it comes to this kind of situation? What kind of acts of God are actually mentioned specifically when it comes to the act? Is there a guideline, or how is exactly is it considered a disaster? Does the council have to meet? What does it look like?
Yes, so disasters are a part of human civilization, and even though we call it act of God, there are natural phenomena behind this. So now we feel it more because of the anthropogenic interference with the natural environment have increased the risk of disasters. So disasters can be natural and hazards as well as man-made disasters. So many of the natural disasters such as climate change now have recognized as some sort of a human interference, majorly human interference, so it is anthropogenic. So therefore it is that with that understanding that we have to look at the disasters not only as natural phenomena. So these disasters can be natural disasters and also man-made disasters. In Sri Lanka, if you look at, we have 2 monsoons. So, from May to September, southwest monsoon, and northeast from December to February. So, every year throughout the civilization of Sri Lanka, we can see that there have been these kind of disasters, flooding and at sometimes drought. So, depending on the meteorological situation, many disasters are happening in Sri Lanka. And also with regard to this monsoons and other things, lightning and other kind of as a consequence of the torrential rain, that we have some other disasters as well. And also other than that, as a biodiversity hotspot, we have to handle so many other disasters as well, such as man-made disasters like elephant attacks and some other various different kind of disasters other than these main natural disasters. So, this is how the disasters can be recognized while we are facing it on annual basis, daily basis, weekly basis. Now the intents of the disasters and the intents of the disasters and the frequency of the disasters have increased due to climate change issue. So, those are the background that we have to understand where we recognize a disaster.
Definitely. Professor, before we go in for a break, I think we can get to some of the legal specifics I wanted to delve into in the following segment, which is relating to the authorities and institutions that have been put in place by the law in order to help manage disaster situations. Can you help us understand the legal roles and responsibilities and the creation of a disaster management center that you mentioned, the council that you mentioned? Can you help us exactly understand what their scope is and what exactly their roles and responsibilities are in a situation of disaster?
Yes, I think the National Council on Disasters are the main body, main authority, main decision making and policy making body, and the responsibility lies not only during a disaster. I would emphasize the responsibility should be more on before, prior to a disaster. So, disasters are they are not like routine issues that we handle. They are routine in one sense, but they are not like routine things that you need to predict. You need to have system in place to prevent. So, according to the precautionary principle that environmental law is discussing, that every state is responsible to, depending on the available scientific certainty, to predict future damages and take the necessary action at present. So, this precautionary principle is a worldwide recognized environmental law principle, where we see some of the Supreme Court judgments even in Sri Lanka has accepted this precautionary principle. So, under precautionary principle, government and the related authorities are responsible to get the country prepared prior to the disaster is taking place. So, before and then during and then aftermath, the relief and the addressing the issues coming up as a consequence of the disaster are at the 3 stages. The responsibility is with the government as well as local government and also provincial council. At various different levels of governance, there are certain responsibilities.
Professor, a question of curiosity before we end off this segment. When it comes to what you mentioned as well, now the National Council and the Centre, there is a sense of pre-preparedness that need to be understood when it comes to the formation of this council in itself. In your experience and in your understanding, where exactly does the bigger scope lie? Is it before disaster? Is it the scope during disaster or post disaster? Where exactly are the most responsibilities in your understanding of this law?
I would say in all 3 stages. Responsibility is different. So, we need to understand the scope of the responsibility at 3 different levels. But I think it is equal, because disasters hit not just poor people, not just average people, everyone else across the board, not only human beings but also animals and nature as well. So at the during, before, post, I think all three stages, everyone who is responsible is responsible.
Yes, and a very important point you mentioned as well, climate change causing adverse reactions when it comes to the normal climate conditions we have in the country. A small question of curiosity, Professor, do you expect now with climate change happening, obviously disasters might be on a scale unprecedented to before. Do we have to anticipate this kind of change when it comes to the laws that are in the country? Is there maybe a need to actually have proactive measures when it comes to experimenting and understanding the scale of an impending disaster right now with the current situation with climate change severely impacting our local biodiversity as well?
Definitely, Anuradha, we are an island nation. In 2019, we were listed among the top countries of climate vulnerabilities. So what more that we need to have proof? I think the problem is that we have much more imminent problems like urgent requirements in the country. So the Sri Lanka is recovering after economic crisis, and also there are many issues with corruption and which the currently Sri Lanka is struggling with many issues with corruptions, and anti-corruption process is ongoing. So there are much more pertinent issues than if someone asks you about disaster. But whatever we do, if the nature rules and hit a disaster, we can see the devastating situation that any country, any government would have to go through. So I think much more than anything else, environmental protection and the disaster management should be #1 priority in this country, because no matter how much we achieve in economically and otherwise politically, what's the whole point of when we have this kind of destruction? So I think that I think and I sincerely hope that the current government will pay more attention on environmental protection and disaster management while on the other areas as well.
Yes, precisely. Professor, I want to move on to the rest of the institutions and also the processes that have been enshrined through the laws that have been enacted for disaster management specifically, and also to get on citizens' rights and safeguards as well as the emergency powers that are being deployed during situations such as these. But before that, we do have to go in for a short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Shamindri, a third-year law student at the Royal Institute of Colombo. And my question is on the current context. How do disaster management authorities get legal direction for their activities?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We're in conversation with Professor Kokila Lankathilake Konasinghe relating to disaster management laws in the country. We just got down the first segment. Thank you very much for that, Professor. We have a comprehensive understanding of the fundamentals. Now I think we were slowly merging into the specifics as well. When it comes to the responsibilities of certain individual stakeholders as well as authorities and institutions that have been made specifically for disaster management, there's also the understanding of the tertiary or the surrounding individuals and institutions that already have been in place that have added responsibility now in a disaster management situation. Can you help us understand and differentiate exactly how responsibilities are shared in situations of disaster management between provincial councils, between the central government, and also, of course, the local authorities on the ground? What exactly does that look like?
Yes. Now, provincial councils also have to play a major role, and I personally, as an environmentalist myself, I think that many things could have been avoided and many things could have been faced with proper management of when it comes to environmental protection if we put much more focus on local governments and provincial council level. Because Sri Lanka is very diverse, very diverse when it comes to environment and also cultural, religious and all the other areas. So therefore, even though we are an island nation, we have much more diversity when it comes to understanding environment and then taking the precautionary action. So the central government or the parliament or the cabinet of ministers may have limited, perhaps limited access to certain situations at the local government and the provincial council level, which the certain authorities at those levels can have easily get access to. And managing, now we are missing this entire concept of management. So disaster management, so management can be done through the central body, but we must have proper and strategic plan towards reaching out to the locals. So I think that is the way that we should look at this entire situation of this disaster management. So these provincial councils and also local government authorities, they understand the geography better and the human geography better. So they have the statistics data from Grama Seva Niladhari, development officer at that level to the top level of the local government authorities. And also the resources have been devolved, have been centered within the local government and the provincial council, which should be effectively used for to face a disaster situation. So that kind of a rational planning and management should be there with the disaster management level. So I think provincial councils as well as these local government authorities can do a better and more efficient service if we have planned and put it into the system. So I think the entire structure of the disaster management under the disaster management center, but reaching out to more effectively to other government authorities at the grassroots level and also at the provincial level.
Yes, and a question to help understand further as well, Professor, does that mean that the currently existing legislature for disaster management does not have a specified list of responsibilities for provincial councils and local authorities, or is there and we're not seeing it being enacted? What exactly is it looking like, Professor?
Provincial councils have the responsibility. Local governments does not specifically recognized by the Disaster Management Act, even though when it comes to the multi-stakeholder approach in managing disasters, they are involved, but not specifically mentioned in the Act. But the provincial councils, they have responsibility and they have representation, and they can put their input, insights in terms of their localities, the problems and the necessary actions when it comes to the national policy, disaster management council level. So I think that is in the law, but if you look at with the more broader holistic approach, then I think both local government and provincial councils are playing a crucial role, and they should actually, and I propose actually as a reform that to consider more local government authority involvement in the disaster management situation.
Yes, I want to get to the reforms aspect as well, probably towards the end of our program. But specifically, yes, there should be a collaborative approach, as I understand from your response, Professor. Moving on, when it comes to the situation on the ground, as we saw recent times as well, when it comes to the law that has already been mentioned, do you believe that there's a practical approach to it? Is it a working model when it comes to real life situations? Do these authorities actually help properly manage the disaster when it comes to the shared responsibilities? As far as I understood, Professor, from your previous response as well, there is a responsibility, an obligation upon the shoulders of provincial councils and local authorities. But is there a practical example of it working properly at the current moment?
Yes. Now, if we take the Act, And section 10 states that it shall be the duty of every ministry, government department and public corporation to prepare disaster management plan with respect to such ministry, appointment of technical advisory committees. So I think the law actually has the proper system that I've been talking all this time. But the only thing is implementing. So according to section 8, subnational level district and divisional secretariats also play a role in policy coordination to the center, and also sectoral implementation to ministries and institutions, ground level response to district and divisional administration. So I think there are many things, many provisions that one would dream of having a system when it is the disaster is happening. But the problem is, as I told you, that there were many more important areas than this, but now it made us realize that this is the most important area. So I hope that maybe by enforcing this particular already established legal framework would also be sufficient to a certain extent if we do it in a proper management structure.
Yes, specifically when it comes to the implementation, I believe, Professor, as we already have the basic framework in the law, we just need to see a practical application of that law. I want to move on relating to the state duties and also the citizen rights, specifically when it comes to disaster management situations. How exactly does disaster management link to fundamental rights that are enshrined in Sri Lanka, specifically in our constitution? What is it looking like when it comes to balancing fundamental rights and situations of disaster and disaster management?
Yes. Now, when you ask that question, something stuck to my mind, that is Meetota Mulla garbage incident, collapse incident. And there were more than 30 people were killed as a result of a collapse of a garbage yard. So imagine the situation of disasters, and we wouldn't have ever imagined that in Sri Lanka people would have killed by such an incident. But this is what the disaster is all about. It can happen at any time, any point, to anyone. So it is nothing to do with poverty, or it is nothing to do with uneducated communities. It is nothing to do with illiteracy. It is anyone can face any kind of disasters. So therefore this fundamental rights is one area that actually in one of my research also I argue that it is a fundamental right to be protected by disasters. So when you say fundamental right, the executive and the administrative officers are directly responsible. So if you claim a fundamental right petition at the Supreme Court, then the other party will be someone representing the executive and the administrative authority. So why this is like that, and how it relates to disasters? Now the responsibility of under the public trust doctrine, the people who govern a country, the state, the government, has a responsibility under the public trust doctrine, and then put everything in place, every system in place to prevent any harm on any person in the community. So when you take that kind of discourse, then this fundamental right will be guaranteed, should be guaranteed to right to life. So to life, protect life, and also maintain clean and healthy environment. But for a country like Sri Lanka, we are a developing nation and we are struggling with our economic development, and there can be limitations, because once a fundamental right is recognized in the constitution, the government is under the responsibility of guaranteeing that right. So if you look at the directive principles of state policies, they are not justiciable, but they are directing the government towards policy making. So I think that rather than going into the fundamental right basis in a situation like that, because we need to be very realistic when proposing legal reforms. So I think we would rather go to the directive principles of state policies, where the government is under the responsibility to provide proper management and legal structure to manage a disaster. So people should have living standard, quality life. So quality life should be guaranteed by the government under the constitution. And also Article 12, equality, right to be equal before the law, that also can have some kind of a relevancy in a situation like this. And in addition to that, torture, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. So it's not only punishment under the Article 11 that we are discussing when it comes to fundamental right, it is also treatment. So treatment can have actively or inactively. So inaction also comes into the discussion, and under the Supreme Court several judgments have taken this inaction, being silent or being inactive when your action should decide the protection of the certain right. So that also can count in here. So under that also Article 11 under the torture provision also we can argue this. So likewise even Article 14, freedom of expression, under which the government should guarantee right to shelter and right to movement, all these will be limited under disaster situation. And not only that, right to shelter, right to other access to education and other things, but education is not a right to a fundamental right, but it is related under the freedom of expression under Article 14, shelter and lawful occupation and movement, right to movement, all these will be limited. So the rights will be limited, rights will be violated when a disaster happens. But we have to consider that if you recognize it as a fundamental right, then the government will be under a strict regulation that they need to guarantee that right. So we have to have a more practical and pragmatic approach towards this. So I would say that when you ask about the fundamental right, it will be more practical if you go to directive principles of state policies and have a more broader understanding of the disaster management situations.
Yes, Professor, I want to ask you specifically relating to emergency powers that have been granted during situations of disaster management and also post-disaster management as well, and also about the responsibilities that the state has when it comes to early warnings and, of course, as you mentioned, the shelters, evacuations and displacement, how exactly the government handles that in a legal scope. But before we speak about any of that, we do have to go in for a short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We'll be right back with the final segment. Stay tuned.
Hello, my name is Chamika Jayasekara, a third year medical student from University of Colombo. My question is for the future. What are the areas that require most attention for reform in this law?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We're in our final segment with Professor Kokila Lankathilake Konasinghe relating to disaster management laws in the country. Thank you very much, Professor, for the previous two segments. We did cover as much ground as possible, and I believe we left off on a very important point relating to how fundamental rights of citizens can be restricted but also should be safeguarded by the government when it comes to situations of disaster management. And a very important point that you mentioned was the rights that have been awarded while being restricted. There's also an obligation for the government to do its utmost to help uphold it. Specifically when it comes to disaster management situations, what exactly is the legal scope of the responsibilities that is owed by the state to the people relating to warnings, early warnings, sheltering, displacement mechanisms, evacuations and such, specifically for the affected people of disasters?
Yes, for that under the this Act at Article 12, under the Disaster Management Act, there is a requirement to implement National Disaster Management Plan and Operational Plan, under which all these areas are discussed. So the problem is that how often we look at these plans and then take actions to implement is problematic. Now the National Council and Disaster Management Center are responsible for issuing early warnings, coordinating evacuations and implementing the National Management Plan and Operation Plan. I think this should be part of the school curriculum even, because not only the officers should be familiar with these things, even the public should be aware. So when it comes to these responsibilities, I would emphasize that not only the government or not only the administrative officers are responsible, because when we discuss these situations with the officers and what happened actually during this disaster, some officers actually expressed their concern, serious concern over the public response. We know that on one hand, Sri Lankans are enormously coming as a help, and they are, regardless of what they have, what they do, they are in action for helping. But on the other hand, understanding the disasters and responding to disasters by the public is very, very problematic. That was very clearly visible during this disaster. Even these early warnings were issued by the Disaster Management Center, but some fishermen still go out for their occupation, which is very problematic. Now they have to prioritize their economic status and also day-to-day living than facing the disaster. So some actually ignored these early warning system. So they just ignored and they just take it as a simple matter, and then they just take the risk and then go. So this kind of understanding wouldn't be there if we have some sort of awareness among the public. So when the early warning is issued, one must take it seriously and then take all the precautionary action. And how much human resource by tri-forces and how much time had to deploy to only to evacuate people, to save their life. So this kind of situation is very, very problematic in a disaster situation. So not only the government or not only the officials, I would say, even the public have the responsibility in all these preparedness and responding to a disaster.
Yes, and on a related note, Professor, now I understand that there is an obligation upon each citizen of this country as well to heed the warnings, to help follow procedure in order to ensure a safe environment for everyone. But does Sri Lanka's currently existing laws adequately balance when it comes to the safety, public safety, specifically relating to disaster management situations, and also individual freedoms, as we mentioned, the fundamental rights as well, during prolonged emergency situations and disaster responses? Do you believe that the law that's already in Sri Lanka's context adequately balances the need for individual freedoms to be protected as well as public safety?
I think yes, because if you interpret the constitutional provisions under Article 13 and under Article 12, equality, and also these other provisions in terms of individual freedom, I think the act should be lawful, even the evacuation process or whatever that the officials undertake should be lawful. So rule of law is fundamental to this country, and I can see many initiatives are towards ensuring towards that, so which is a positive direction. and rule of law, and then every activity that's taken by, every decision taken by an official should be lawful and within the given parameters of the power, otherwise it will be ultra vires. Then that can be questioned by a writ jurisdiction, under the writ jurisdiction. So, and also there are many administrative law principles prevail in this system in Sri Lanka, where you can question an administrative officer under natural justice principle, transparency, accountability. So, all these good governance principles matter in a situation like this. So, individual freedom should be respected, but at the same time we are thinking about public safety. So, how to strike the balance is very well defined in the constitution, very well defined in all these laws. So, lawfulness and also the action you take should be proportionately matching with the situation. So, you can't overrule that. So, all these legal principles are very well within the system, current system.
Exactly. And a very important question that arose when you were mentioning, Professor, specifically relating to the checks and balances and how the action should be proportionate to the situation at hand. Does Sri Lanka's law adequately have proper checks and balances when it comes to ensuring that emergency powers and safeguards are not misaligned or misused in any sort of way against citizens?
Yes. So, now when we think of a disaster for an average person, it's all about either flooding or drought, and then the people, the officials go to the field and then deal with that. It's not only that. There are so many other multi-stakeholders that involve in this kind of situation. For example, now this custom clearance, we are getting many funding. So, what is the situation with the custom clearing? Can we follow the same similar day-to-day legal framework there? So, what kind of exceptions should be there and what kind of response by the government should be there? So, likewise there are so many other situations and other legal framework also involved in here. So, I think that for example also that landing and offloading aid. So, this International Civil Aviation Organization has a special provisions to do, how to do this. And we have a very unfortunate situation in Sri Lanka as also a pilot passed away as a result of this kind of situation. So, it's not only very simple format that we see in a disaster, but it is much more complicated, and I think that also now Sri Lanka is promoting tourism, and the foreigners, large number of foreigners are also affected, and as a state what is our responsibility towards that? And the health situation, aftermath of disaster, the health situation is pandemics, and all these kind of situations are involved. So, that is why this council is consisted of all the line ministries, irrigation, meteorology and environment, town and country planning, all health, education. So, everyone is in this council, Disaster Management National Council. So, that is why they should meet less than 3 times and a year, and then discuss what is the situation. So, I think even at least in the future, I think these things will be very closely monitored, and if all the laws that we discuss in this program, Anuradhi, in implementation proper way, I don't think Sri Lanka needs to be bothered, even though we have recognized some reforms.
Yes, Professor, unfortunately we're running out of time, so I'd like to ask you very quickly my final question for you, specifically when it comes to disaster management, as what you can relate to the public as well. What do you expect to see moving forward when it comes to our legal landscape, specifically when it comes to the development of these laws, or maybe as you mentioned, better implementation? What are your expectations?
Yes, number one is we need to amend, or we need to have a different sort of legal framework on climate change and its impacts. It is number one, because we will soon face a lot of problems with that. So, that is one thing, and also the maintaining a national database that was also lacking in this situation. So maintaining a national database and digital platform. Sri Lanka is moving towards the digital economy, and then I think this is one of the priorities that they need to consider. And also updating this database is also important, and also multi-stakeholder approach towards this. You cannot act in isolation, you cannot pass the ball. This is a national situation, and all the multi-stakeholders should take multi-dimensional approach towards disaster management.
All right. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have to discuss about disaster management laws and the response in Sri Lanka. Professor, thank you so much for taking the time. I believe our viewers would have had a better, more comprehensive understanding of exactly what laws are present and what exactly we should be aware of when it comes to situations such as this. So thank you very much for your time, Professor. All right, well, we leave you tonight with the words of Jim Wallace. Sometimes it takes a natural disaster to reveal a social disaster. That's all we have for you tonight. You can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube page, and we value your opinion as always, so please share your thoughts and feedback with us through email at feedback.adncenglish@dena.lk or via WhatsApp at 076 805 7933. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good night.